Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and welcome to the final presentation of the 2021 Learning Institute. My name is Christy Allen. I'm Frayme's Family Engagement Specialist and I'm currently residing in Barrie, Ontario. I'm so excited to be joining you for this plenary this afternoon. So the focus of our plenary is on broadening system approaches to the youth mental health and substance use system. And aligning with our theme of defying convention, we will hear from speakers on topics and voices that are often left out of the conversation in the youth mental health and substance use space. So there will be 5 lightning or TED Talk style presentations that will be approximately 5 minutes each. And these lightning talks are an opportunity for our speakers to share more about their work, passion, expertise, or areas of interest relating to our plenary theme. So following this, we will gather back together on screen to have an open fishbowl style discussion regarding some of the most pressing topics impacting today's system and hearing from all of our wonderful speakers. So when we have 15 minutes left in the plenary, we will open up the floor to further questions put forth by the audience. So please make note of questions that are coming up during the lightning talks and the fishbowl, and then we'll prompt you to add them into the chat. So I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker, Harmony, who has graciously offered to share her lived experience as an urban Indigenous youth and her commitment to advocacy across many different spheres. So welcome, Harmony.
Miigwech, ani bojo kwekwe kansi, kami shkat Indigenous cause, we come from Donchiba, Ottawa, and Donchi, Inoji Dodam, Yishna Aji Nekadase Nadiskabonwe, and Ishnabe Medarin Canada. Hello, my name is Harmony Ishkafigan. I am from Mccackern and I'm ceded reserve and live in Ottawa on Algonquin, unceded and unsurrendered territory. My clan is Pike and I'm 26 winters old. I am part of the Three Fires tribe, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Parwadi, and I use she and her pronouns. Last year, I didn't even know how to say my introduction in the Anishinaabe language, but it's from my culture and teaching to be able to introduce yourself, be able to say which community you're from. And I'm fortunate to have that connection to my community because I grew up on the reserve with my family. I was around a lot of language keepers that remind me of how our culture is embedded in the language. There needs to be more opportunities for Indigenous youth to feel comfortable at taking up space to speak their language and share their culture, because we already lost so much from colonization. I still hesitate to do my introduction too, because of like tokenism, imposter syndrome, and the general lack of representation of people not being able to understand me. I was not raised in a traditional Indigenous family either that follows the power trail or hunts and goes to ceremonies a lot, right? There's intergenerational trauma in my family, but there's also intergenerational strength and resilience because my grandparents survived a residential school called Spanish that led to like the cycle of violence and addictions. My parents are alcoholics and most of the Indigenous men in my life have been incarcerated. So we moved to the city for high school with my mother and my brothers and we all experienced culture shock. But I struggled to adapt to this land a lot. My family drank and fought often because of the convenience in buying alcohol that I had to move out at 17. I really struggled with being homeless. There needs to be more support in navigating the mental health services for youth, especially when you're transitioning into adulthood, because I lost track of how many times I had to restart that process to get my intake assessment. I learned to be patient with myself though, while being on the waiting list. But I would use alcohol and self-harm to cope because I was just feeling so much stress. I now know that it's all right if you only show up as far as the front door of a group meeting, or I guess in this case, a waiting room, because we're all on Zoom. As long as you just keep showing up. It's important to practice asking for help too, because building community support takes time. Because today I'm sober, I lived in my apartment for like almost 3 years, the longest I've ever lived in a place. And I lived with my partner in 4 cats. But yeah, I became familiar with this land on Ottawa, what's now called Ottawa, from taking walks around the Ottawa River or Kitchissippi River, because it reminded me of my home community on Mccackern Island, which is the largest freshwater island in the world. And I'm currently working on a project called the Youth Water Leader Scene that intends to bring awareness about protecting waterways by showcasing youth artwork related to water. And there are like 5 diverse other youth that helped me gain submissions by promoting the scene on social media and translating French. I received a grant from Taking It Global that allowed the project team to expand and gain submissions from outside the Ottawa watershed, like all across Turtle Island. So the purpose of the Youth Water Lagoon was just to uplift youth voices, inspire others to stay connected to water and do art during COVID-19. But I hope to see more Indigenous youth in the decision-making process, because the Indigenous population kind of like only 4%, but Indigenous youth population is like increasing rapidly. And it's like leading to statistics of high rates of dropout, suicide, and foster care system. I was always taught to always think of like the next 7 generations while honoring the 7 generations behind me. So I'm a helper with Assembly 7 Generations. It's an Indigenous youth group in Ottawa, and they've been meeting every Friday as we transition their weekly gatherings online due to the pandemic. I'm also one of their Indigenous youth evaluators, and I got to do one of the Kahoot nights for language classes, and I even like collaborated on a paint night to gain submissions for my zine. Yeah, I do a lot of community support. I was even able to interview a youth that I met through the Camp H Youth Advisory for my Instagram series. That's also helping me with this long-term project called Niche In. So I'm doing another project to create a digital platform for Indigenous educators and allies. I was one of the select few of the student groups from a virtual youth summit that pitched their idea and received a grant for RBC Future Launch. And I don't consider myself techie, like I just happened to meet another youth web designer that was totally down to help me build this up. So I look forward to launching that. But I'm fortunate to have so many community connections because I was able to form various partnerships with other youth and collaborate on different works. If you're taking on a leadership role in group projects, try not to hold on any expectations and add any pressure onto yourself, because we are in the middle of a pandemic. It's good to know your triggers to avoid burnout and when to take a break. But thank you. I will now like to introduce you to another change maker, Cherie, who is an aspiring nurse therapist looking to create more conversations around mental health and substance use abuse stigma. She has a passion for helping people understand the stigma around mental health, and we can make sure that support is more accessible for everyone, regardless of age. With that, I'll pass it off to you, Cherie.
Hi everyone, my name is Sherry. So yeah, I'm 23 years old and I live in Brampton, Ontario. So the focus that I want to put out for today's plenary involves cultural perspectives and just talking about some of the generational gaps that might come with looking at mental illness and substance use. So to start off, I'm Filipino Canadian. I was raised by parents and family who migrated from the Philippines. And I also have some lived experience with some mental illness. And yeah, so growing up, there were many cultural aspects of my childhood that made it really hard for me to find help or to even try looking for help. And this was mainly due to the stigma that was surrounding mental illness and substance use at the time, and even just till today. So as a result, I really didn't have a lot of education about that growing up. And so when I started experiencing some of these issues when I was around 13 years old, I really thought it was just a phase. I didn't really talk about it, but of course there was like that famous emo phase everyone kind of goes through when you're growing up. And, you know, there were like embarrassing pictures of me with my home cut, really ugly side swept bangs and like the matching arm warmers. And yeah, so for me, that was a phase. But my mental health issues, they were not, unfortunately. But it's interesting because to a lot of my family members, this was considered a phase. And it was something that they thought that I would just hop right out of when I reached a certain age. But I didn't, and that made us all uncomfortable. You see, emotions weren't really expressed in my household. Everything was basically repressed. Any thoughtful conversation surrounding our lived experiences and feelings, like I didn't even know what that was. My family didn't even know what that was. And yeah, so I didn't realize until I got older just how misinformed I truly was about everything and these issues, and how misinformed my family and especially those within my culture were. So some of the things that I look at now kind of showing this part of my life and how prominent that miseducation was, for example, not only like how emotions were expressed, but also even just how drugs were being used or being seen as in my culture. So for example, I remember one time I was smoking weed, as one does, and I got caught, obviously, by my mom. And I remember I forgot to lock the door. And when my mom caught me, she would say things like, "You're ruining your life. Your memory is going to be shot forever. You're going to be an addict now. Like, is that what you want to do with your life?" And I was like way too high. Like, what is happening? But yeah, so growing up, me and my family, we fought a lot. And yeah, we just didn't understand each other. And I found the way that a lot of elder family members, so that includes both my parents, even like cousins and aunts and uncles, the way they spoke was very defensive. It was very blurred, and just, it felt like they were overreacting and just couldn't really understand what I was trying to get at, and were only saying certain things to hurt me. So there were words thrown that were like, "You're overreacting," which is like the pretty big one. And I would never talk to my parents that way. Who gives you the right to talk to me that way? And yeah, so I remember just feeling really hurt by all of that at the time. But with a lot of patience and a lot of anger, I was able to kind of read in between those lines, and realize that my parents, my aunts, my uncles, my family, they had their own traumas growing up. They grew up in families who taught them similar values, similar thoughts, and no one was allowed to talk back. They weren't allowed to express emotions. Most of their life, their careers, their goals, they were mapped out for them by their parents, by their elder family members. So yeah, this was a generational thing, and it was being passed down from family to family. And since no one was allowed to ask questions or basically go against these values and thoughts, nothing was ever changed. It was at that point of realization that I could sort of make out what they were really trying to say to me, which was kind of like, I can't understand you because I was not allowed to express my own emotions in the same way that you're doing right now. So yeah, all of these thoughts and ways of living kind of became ingrained in their heads. So it became uncomfortable for them when they were suddenly being faced with someone who was just talking about it so freely. Like, what is that? I've never done that before. Like, what do I do now? Kind of feeling going on. And I remember my mom telling me the first time that I talked about my issues with her, the first thing she said was that it felt weird. And I thought that was interesting to hear that she said that. Yeah, so with a lot of patience and just really trying to explain things in a way that they might understand, and for them to talk to me about their own traumas and feelings, slowly this cycle of miscommunication in my family, I wouldn't say it's broken yet, but it's definitely headed in that direction. And that's really all I can ask for, considering this is such an ongoing generational thing. So to me, this really shows how important it is to share your voice and just how much we can shape our future if we really try our best. And yeah, it feels like because this is a generational issue that is being passed down, this type of miscommunication needs to be reset. And I think if we try our hardest and are open-minded to certain people, because this is going to take a long time. It took me like 3 years. I really believe that we can be that reset. Yeah. So next, I would like to welcome Najat Scott, who is hoping to share messages about the problematic ways that mental health care practices and services override and ignore the individual's identity and self-expressed needs. So on to you, Najat.
I think Najat's Zoom is like frozen. So if it's all right with everyone, I can go next, and then I can pass it on to her after. Okay, so for my introduction, mine was pretty much based on my TED Talk though, but it's to do with the stigma and cultural aspects heavily. So I can talk about that a little bit here. So there are many barriers around mental health, which include personal, cultural, institutional, and many more. We cannot make assumptions on people's day-to-day life and circumstances to conclude that they are not facing something big or question their validity. Stigma plays an evident relationship with mental health. As a result of our culture, where we are in the world, where we go to school or work, our peers, or how we were raised, stigma may be present in each and every one's institutions. As a result, many of us tend to internalize our mental health and reciprocally avoid reaching out to these institutions. This is the very cycle that widens the gap of barriers to mental health, and so many of us end up never reaching out or having these conversations, and as a result, end up going through it all alone in fear that they won't be understood, heard, or validated. As an East Indian woman, I can second the role cultural stigma may play. It is very common to be met with others treating you differently because somehow they have lost confidence in your ability or believe that you will not be successful because you are dealing with something more personal. This stigma may turn into you not being included in opportunities or having opportunities withheld from you in social and institutional situations, and even in your personal life. So this is much due to what others believe about you rather than what you believe about your own self. This then may tend to spread to other areas of your life as a result. For example, your family members may look at you differently or hold a sense of prejudice against you because of the things that are happening in your life. So it turns into a vicious cycle in which, again, we internalize our emotions as a result of self-blame or not feeling that we are able to measure up according to other people's expectations of ourselves. So as a result, I personally tended to internalize my emotions, and it felt like there was no other choice than to just keep to myself or to lose hope in everyday life. But I'm thankful that things did get better for me, and I want to be able to help other people seek hope and to be able to recognize that there will be a positive change, and that if we all work together to break similar cycles to help our mental health needs and have everyone hear and address them without any judgment, I think this world will be a great place. So now I'm going to pass it on to Hodan. Sorry, Najat, if she's here.
Hi, thanks, Riti. Sorry, having some technical difficulties today. So yes, for those of you who are watching who work in mental health serving organizations, thank you for being here. For those of you who've used services, also thank you for being here. You are all probably familiar with catchment areas, which are geographic boundaries used to determine eligibility for service. Some of you are also probably familiar with the dreaded response, "I'm sorry, you aren't within our catchment area." It can be pretty discouraging to have to muster up the energy to find another place to call that you do qualify for, but fortunately, there usually is another resource. Unfortunately, what I want to talk to you about today isn't so simple. As you can all see, I am Black. Specifically, I identify as a Black Canadian. So where do I fit in and who do I access care from when it comes to mental health resources? Well, it would seem pretty obvious that I would fall into the so-called catchment area of resources targeted and aimed to provide for Black Canadians, right? For all you watching and to the providers and services, that makes sense. I have a place. However, I was adopted by a single white woman when I was a kid. You might be wondering why this would change anything. I'm still Black, and therefore I should still fall into the catchment area of resources for Black people. However, in my experience, it's a lot more complicated than that. What makes us who we are isn't just what the world sees. The way I choose to interact with the world and the people in my life is unique, and it's different from someone from another country or race, but also from someone of my own race. However, in my experience with mental health providers, it's my race and culture that are focused on, and specifically that my race does not coincide with what they believe my culture should be. I've been told many times during my ongoing journey with my mental health that my status of being an adoptee by a disparate race parent is the root cause of my mental health conditions and struggles. The conversation has then shifted away from what I was there for initially to dealing with what the provider feels is the underlying issue. While I respect their expertise, I also know I have my own expertise when it relates to myself. I've tried many different methods to take charge over the care I was receiving, to have a bigger say in the direction and focus of my care. Often with new therapists, I found myself not even mentioning that I was adopted at all, dancing around this huge part of my life so that I could get the care that I wanted and needed. While I do consider my adoption a big part of my identity, it's not at all I am. My white mother did not deprive me of the ability to learn and engage with Ethiopian culture. She actually gave me lots of opportunities external to herself and aware of her limitations. I'm very, very grateful for my mother for this. I'm also grateful that it was presented as a choice. Throughout my life, I've made active choices that dictate my identity. Being told by healthcare providers that my mental health struggles are due to the fact that my culture doesn't coincide with my race is not helpful. This approach undermines my agency to identify myself. It takes away my confidence, and it indirectly tells me that I've made the wrong decisions with my life. I've chosen my community, I've chosen my culture, I've chosen my wants and needs. I'm a Black Canadian, and I just also happen to be an adoptee. So why is it okay for mental health care providers to try and take that all away from me? To take away the things that are concrete and grounding factors in my life when they're supposed to help? And I'm not here to say that mental health providers are intentionally trying to do harm. However, I do believe that my voice has been overridden and extinguished due to their assumptions of my race and culture. To providers such as physicians, it's pretty clear that I should fall into the catchment area of mental health services for Black people, that these services will help foster the cultural identity that I'm lacking. But I don't believe that I'm lacking culture at all. I just don't have the culture that some perceive I should have. However, I do agree that I would benefit from Black-focused services. To the world, I'm Black, and therefore I've encountered bigotry, racism, and disparate mental health care based on my race. While I may not interact with these services in the way that my physicians may believe is best for me, mainly being engaging with African and Black culture, I still believe I could benefit, even if it's having a Black therapist who can help me understand and deal with and recognize microaggressions from my peers or colleagues. So you might be thinking that this isn't an ideal fix, but it's a great Band-Aid fix. I found my own way to work and navigate the system for my personal needs, even if it doesn't match up with my physician's explicit roadmap. While there necessarily needs to be change, and I believe that physicians should allow their clients to map out their own decisions and write out the directions themselves, this is not where my story ends. The so-called catchment area that I'm having the hardest time navigating is associated with the mental health services for Black people. Now, I know I just said that I can benefit from these services in a way that works for me, but it isn't about working with these services once I have a place within them that has caused me so much desolation. It's finding my space in the first place. Many of these services use the term ACB community, standing for African, Caribbean, and Black community. Again, I know it may seem pretty obvious to you that I fit into that. I'm Black, but what is a community? I've struggled a lot trying to figure this out. Community can be defined as a group of people with a common characteristic or interest living together within a larger society. Through the lens of the larger society, I fit pretty well into the ACB community. There's a clear boundary between those who are African, Caribbean, and Black and those who are not. And it is this clear boundary and my obvious place on the ACB side of the fence that led to my physicians suggesting these services in the first place. However, like I said before, the way I choose to interact with the world and the people in my life is unique, and it's different from someone of another country or race, but also from someone of my own race. Physical presentations of a racial group may be relatively homogeneous, but the people within them are not. This is why I get caught on the word community. It's such a simple word, but it has acted as a huge barrier for me when I'm considering accessing care specific for Black people. I've chosen a relationship with African culture that is more distant than others may have, and I was not raised by African or Black parents. The fences around those who are racially African, Caribbean, or Black are there to protect and provide desperately needed services and care, but there are also fences within those fences. To me, the word community is a fence I cannot cross. I've been told that my upbringing is the reason for this. I've been told that it's because I was adopted by a white woman, that I'm not enough of a Black person, that I simply couldn't understand the plights of a true Black person. It's almost like the other side of the same coin that my physicians imposed on me. My physicians argue a gain of mental health struggles and disorders due to what they believe to be an incongruency of my race and culture. On the other hand, services that cater to the Black community argue a lack of my struggles associated with being Black due to my supposedly incongruent race and culture. My physicians believe that the solution is to be more engaged with Black culture, disregarding my confidence and comfort with my chosen identity. However, due to my chosen self-identity, the Black community feels as if I'm not truly one of their own, fencing me off from the inner circle and essentially hindering my ability to even meet this threshold if I ever wanted to. But to me, my race and culture are not incongruent. They are separate, yet equally important and harmonious parts of myself that make me who I am. However, because of my identity, I'm in a catch-22, a catchment 22 area, if you will, and there doesn't seem like there's anyone to call. I imagine this problem isn't particularly unique to me or even to adopted people. I can imagine that people from mixed race biological families might also encounter their own catchment 22 areas. So what's the solution? Ideally, I think it would be great to dissolve of the boxes and labeled spaces for each person to dictate the needs, resources, and care that they need, that all care, regardless of the provider or service, treats each individual equally, but uniquely. Unfortunately, I don't think we're there yet. Marginalized groups are still disadvantaged and receive disparate treatments. These boundaries and fences are needed to protect and advocate for the needs of these groups. However, these boundaries and fences aren't perfect, and they leave room for many, such as myself, to be stuck in a dreaded catchment 22 area. But being in this catchment 22 area doesn't mean I can't try to make change. I'm currently working with organizations who are working towards more equal treatment for marginalized groups. And that's actually what led me to this great opportunity at the Learning Institute. I am aware of how the larger society sees me, how the ACB community sees me, who I actually am and choose to be, and how these things often don't align. But despite all of this, I still want to help make change for everyone. I want to get to that ideal place where there are no need for boundaries and fences because everyone's treated equally and has equal access to care. The place where no one finds themselves in a catchment 22 area and where everyone can receive the care and support that they personally need. If we're all working towards that, then there is hope. But for today, I think that healthcare providers and those working within the system should be more aware of the variety of patient profiles, recognize them each as unique yet equally valid, and allow the individual to be the main driver in their own mental health journey. To my fellow catchment 22 area folks, the way that you choose to interact with the world and the people in your life is unique and different from someone from another country or race, and may also be different from someone of your own race. But that chosen identity is valid and powerful, and you have a lot to offer towards reaching that ideal. I want to thank you all for listening, and next I'm going to hand it over to Hodan, who's passionate about mental health advocacy, youth engagement, and health equity. She envisions a child and youth mental health system where youth have equitable access to mental health and system use services that meet their unique needs.
Thank you so much, Najat. Hi, everyone. My name is Hodan, and I will be speaking about my experience surrounding mental health and the work that I'm currently doing. To share a little bit about my background, I grew up in a predominantly immigrant and Black community. Growing up, I noticed that a lot of my community members struggled with their mental health, But at that time, I didn't have the words for it, as mental health wasn't really discussed in my community. And if it was behind closed doors. As I continued to get older and started high school, I saw the same thing. My Black friends and classmates struggled with their mental health, but again, they weren't speaking out about it, accessing services, and unfortunately not getting the help that they needed. It wasn't until I reached university where I recognized that this just wasn't isolated to my community, but it's rather a well-documented phenomenon that Black children and youth face increased barriers and difficulties in accessing child and youth mental health services and substance use services. And this is not a new issue either. I definitely wasn't the first person to recognize this. And seeing these challenges and barriers for my community members and other marginalized communities motivated me to become an advocate for better access to mental health and substance use services. My first experience with mental health advocacy was through my role as a peer health educator at my university, where essentially I was a liaison between the students and the Health and Wellness Center, which provided mental health services and support. I provided support to students through facilitating workshops on mental health, speaking to students one-on-one, as well as sharing resources on and off campus. Early on in my role, I noticed a similar pattern. I noticed that Black students weren't accessing the mental health services on campus. They weren't reaching out to me in my role as a peer health educator or reaching out to other peer health educators on campus. And this was concerning to me because, again, I was noticing this pattern where Black youth and Black students weren't accessing services and weren't being included in discussions around mental health on campus. So I took the initiative to hold an open forum where Black students could openly share their experiences with their mental health and why they weren't accessing services on campus. In our discussion, we had some emerging themes where essentially students weren't accessing services because the services weren't meeting their needs, as they were treated like they belonged to a monolith, the services weren't appropriate and culturally responsive, and their previous experiences with service providers on and off campus were harmful, as many students mentioned that service providers shared racist and insensitive comments. And unfortunately, this dissuaded them from further accessing services. Our discussions were really eye-opening, and it was really great to have a space and hold a space where Black students could openly share their experiences accessing services. But it was really unfortunate that there was a consensus that none of the services worked for them. After our discussions, I shared this back with my supervisors, and surprisingly, they said this was the first time that they were hearing this. And in asking for support and better services for students, they said that unfortunately they couldn't provide any support as the services were meeting the needs of most of the students on campus, and these were only the experiences of a few. Hearing this made me furious because there's a population of students that faces increased barriers to accessing services and overall feel excluded on campus, and they are not accessing the services. In fact, they've been harmed by these services. Is this not a direct reflection that the services are not working? It's not a reflection of the students, but rather a reflection of the services. And if the services provided are not working for Black students, that means the services aren't working point blank, period. If we ensure that those who are experiencing the most barriers are centered and supported, then all other students will benefit and feel supported as a result. It was devastating to know that after leaving that conversation, I couldn't provide any concrete support to Black students in my role as a peer health educator. But this experience further motivated me to continue to do work, as I truly recognize the need for this work and how much work still needs to be done to improve access to services for Black youth and provide services that meet their needs. So this led me to my current role, working as the chair for a Provincial Youth Action Committee. And our work is currently looking at the experiences of Black and racialized youth in Ontario who have accessed mental health and substance use services, as well as youth who haven't accessed these services. And what led me to do this work was because the experiences of Black and racialized youth in Ontario aren't well documented and known, which was highlighted in my previous role as a peer health educator. In our work, we are asking Black and racialized youth, what supports do they need? What changes would they like to see when accessing mental health and substance use care systems? What hasn't been working for them? And in our role, we really recognize that Black and racialized youth are not a monolith. We see and appreciate their intersecting identities. For example, we highlight the fact that the experiences of Black 2S LGBTQ plus youth are likely different from newcomer racialized youth, and that their experiences should be treated differently. Black and racialized youth perspectives have been historically excluded. In our work, we aim to use the knowledge gathered from this work to provide recommendations to service providers and policymakers. I'm really excited and hopeful about this work, because again, we're centering the powerful lived experience of youth who have historically been left out of conversations surrounding mental health to hopefully inform policy and improve access to services that meet their unique needs. In wrapping up, I just want to share some few final thoughts. I believe we can all take action to better support Black and racialized youth. And we can all start with a reflection and ask the questions. Who is being included in conversations around mental health? Who is not being included in conversations around mental health? Who's accessing services and who is not? And if you are a service provider, are you implementing anti-oppressive practices into your work? Knowing that when we include and center Black and racialized youth and those who are made to be the most marginalized, all others will benefit as their needs will be addressed as well. Thank you. Now I'll pass it over to Christy, who will lead us through the Fishbowl Activity.
Thank you so much to our speakers for those amazing lightning talks. I hope that everyone listening is feeling as inspired as I am, and I just want to acknowledge that it takes a lot of vulnerability and strength to share your stories. So thank you all so much. That was incredible. So next we'll move into our Fishbowl Activity, where we will have a chance to talk about some of the themes that came up in these lightning talks. So we have some questions ready to go. So we'll start with question 1. How is mental health different for everyone? So more specifically, how is access to mental health and substance use services different for different folks? And what barriers may some people face that others do not? And I'll start this off with Harmony.
Thanks, Christy. So how is mental health different for everyone? I think the language around mental health is different for everyone because we need to try and break free from the stigma of mental health, as was said earlier. We just need to talk about more openly and not just on one day. How to access service, specifically how to access to mental health and substance use services, different for folks. Well, I think for Indigenous people, we kind of prefer asking for help in a more non-formal approach, like reaching out to our cousins and aunties or uncles. But there's some barriers because sometimes we need to reach out for support from someone with specific training. But as long as you're talking about it, you'll feel much more lighter. So that's what I say.
Thank you so much, Harmony. And I'll pass it off to anyone else who wants to share right now.
Hi, everyone. So I guess how I see it is kind of similar to what Harmony and what Najat was saying earlier with her speech. So yeah, mental health is a completely different experience for everyone. The symptoms can really range for certain illnesses. The way we cope with things is really different. And with what I said earlier, the way we approach and view mental health in general is just very, very different. So this makes access to mental health, as a result, really a lot harder. And kind of like what Najat was put so well in her speech, certain people can base certain things or certain physical or outside factors of yourself in a way that you don't necessarily identify with or may even benefit from in the end. So that can definitely make the experience a lot harder too. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I'll open it up to any of our other 3 speakers if they want to answer this one, or we can move on to the next question.
I think also to add, it's important to understand what sort of supports people have. People have different financial means, and it can be really expensive to get professional help, and that's a huge barrier. And if you're in wait list, that's a time barrier, right? Not everybody has the luxury of having that time where they feel safe enough or can deal with their situation themselves. And what sort of supports they have at home until they're going to get that professional help. So it's definitely different for everyone based off of their financial means, their own support, how they interact with mental health, and the stigmas around that, like everyone else was saying.
Thank you, Najat. So many helpful points there. So I will open it up to our other two speakers, or if you'd like, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, I can add something. Thank you, Najat, and everyone else for those comments. I think this is a great question. I think mental health is different for everyone because of the identities that they hold, the communities that they belong to, their accesses and resources to power, and their lived experiences. And I think it's also important to highlight that the theme that we've been hearing today is that, no one group of youth are a monolith. So although a group of youth may have a shared identity, for example, Black youth, their experiences around their mental health is not going to be the same. My work is predominantly focused on Black youth. And if we look at how their experiences are different, it's in part due to barriers surrounding lack of culturally responsive care, as well as prejudice and anti-Black racism that they face as they navigate the world, as well as the historical trauma that has been enacted on Black people by the healthcare system. And so I think it's important to recognize that all youth experience mental health differently and that the barriers that they face are different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hodan. I will move on to the next question now so that we can have some time for questions from the audience as well. So what do you wish people knew about trying to fill the gaps in the youth mental health and substance use system? And how can organizations fill these gaps instead of avoiding them? So to start, I'll pass it to Najat.
Well, I think one key thing is that it's to serve a group of people or the people, why not ask that group of people? It's really easy to build off of what people are saying. It gets harder when you're trying to change the framework after it's been completely built. So we all have opinions and all have specific needs that can help build a system that works and is more flexible and dynamic. And all that needs to really be done is to ask. I think that's a really easy way to sort of help figure out where these gaps are, because sometimes organizations aren't even aware of them, and then to fill them in. And that's sort of led by the people who are being served.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Najat. And I'll open this up to any of our other speakers to add your thoughts in as well.
I can go. So I wish people knew more about our experience of racism, verbal and physical violence, just being turned away from services and other negative experiences when we should actually be getting help that we deserve. I hope that other services know that, try to be more supportive and try to have a more holistic approach, like we use ceremony and smudging and other medicines for our well-being. And this can really help build back our confidence in sharing space, and just knowing that these things are important and we need to stand up for our own ways of healing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harmony. And if any of our other speakers want to add anything here, that would be wonderful, or we may have time for a quick answer to our final question.
Yeah, I just wanted to share something super quickly. I think this is, again, a great question, and I think it's really relevant to the theme of this Learning Institute. I wish service providers and others would lean more into innovative and non-conventional approaches to mental health. Understanding, again, that youth are not a monolith, so it's important to center and leverage the lived experience of youth by providing youth a platform and the ability for them to co-create, to find solutions and services that work for them. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in collecting data, looking at statistics and numbers to kind of validate approaches to mental health. And I think that that has its place, but also equally valuing lived experience to validate these innovative approaches. And I also think that in terms of avoiding it, I think it's always easy to make excuses. And if now is not the time, when is the time? So we know from community's experiences that currently a lot of services are not working, and we should be working to kind of fill those gaps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hadan. So I will open this up again to any of our other speakers if they want to add any final thoughts, or we might have time for a quick answer to our last question. All right, let's move into our final question. So in light of the social justice issues that have arisen in the past year, what barriers and facilitators have you seen in mental health advocacy, and what have you learned? And sorry, I will pass this off to Riti to start.
Okay. Sorry, do you mind just repeating the first part of the question, please?
Absolutely. So in light of the social justice issues that have arisen in the past year, what barriers and facilitators have you seen in mental health advocacy, and what have you learned?
Okay, great, thank you. So in light of the social justice issues that have arisen during this past year, the barriers that I've seen in mental health advocacy are mainly interpersonal characteristics, such as a lack of empathy, compassion, and validity toward mental health issues. Also, by ignoring the individuality of people and their lived experience, has provided a great barrier in terms of people being able to reach out for help and other people on the other side to understand their experiences. So I would say that these are the very driving forces behind what prevents people from reaching out to seek resources and services in the community. We as a society need to foster a culture of care, empathy, and compassion, starting by valuing the inherent worth and dignity of people and their issues, regardless of race, gender, ability, culture, religion, and sexual orientation, as well as other factors such as socioeconomic status and the ability to be able to interact with other people for resources. So, given all of this in mind, I have learned that in order to move forward as a society, it starts with the steps that we can all take personally to recognize our privilege and biases in order to foster a more inclusive mentality through which we can be better informed of other people's journeys.
Thank you so much, Riti. And I am just going to let the audience know that very shortly we will open it up to your questions. So please feel free to add them to the chat. But first, I wanted to invite our other speakers to respond to this final Fishbowl question.
I could add something. So I noticed that a lot of people from different backgrounds and different cultural groups kind of coming together throughout the year to kind of support one another, especially right now. There's been so many different issues that are being addressed, especially in 2020. That was like a big year for it, and obviously right now. And it was also kind of hard to see, like, I guess, like the true nature of certain people. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but it was kind of like that in my life. So I was able to have more conversations surrounding these topics with people I knew, and it did make us become closer, but it did make me question some of certain people's values. And a lot of it I didn't agree with, and it was just a lot of harmful things and thought processes that I really found kind of weird that I knew these people like basically my whole life, and then I'm just finding out that they believe in this sort of thing. So yeah, I won't say exactly what they are, but yeah, it was interesting because you care about them and you have kind of this inner dilemma and you don't really know how to make of it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, thank you. And we have an audience question that really ties into this theme. So maybe I'll ask it here and let our speakers respond to this as well. So we had someone ask, how can we address white supremacy in the mental health sector? There's been a lack of BIPOC presenters in these spaces and many workshops come from colonial knowledge. So I'll open this up to any of our presenters who want to answer this one.
I could try. Yeah, definitely. It kind of relates back to the last question, just about like all the social movements that happened in 2020. And a lot of that social movement was led by the Black Lives social movement. And that's what like made the Washington Redskins change their logo. But there definitely needs to be more anti-racism, anti-oppression in order to decenter white supremacy and stop sugarcoating it. On September 28th, the viral video of Joyce Ekuan dead at 37, an ex-immigrant woman filming herself in the hospital. It shows there needs to be more representation and accountability. I hope to see more youth evaluators bring in their voice and just more translators on Turtle Island. And yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, Harmony. And I'll invite any of our other speakers as well if they'd like to answer this question or anything about the previous Fishbowl question, because they're a little bit intertwined.
I think this ties into a lot what Sherry was saying. It was very polarizing last year, but I think that that isn't necessarily bad. I think it can be used, you know, at least there's conversation, and the conversation around these things is something that wasn't there. And if there's no conversation, there can't be any change or any progress or any bettering. So I think that that is really one of the ways to, you know, change the framework and dismount white supremacy is just having the conversation, wedging in spaces for marginalized groups where they have a space to heal and a space to speak and share. So yeah, I've lost friends last year too, Sherry. But I mean, the conversations I was able to have, I hope at least opened up some minds, and the people who are willing to hear them, I do know that it created better relationships and, you know, better lives for all of us.
Thank you so much for sharing, Najat. I don't think we have any other questions coming in just yet, so I'll invite any of our speakers to answer this question or share any reflections they've had from this Fishbowl discussion and hearing each other's wonderful lightning talks. So I can share a little bit about what it was like hearing you all speak. There's some really amazing themes that were coming through, really about how important it is to start with when you're creating new mental health substance use spaces or services, to really work with the community from the beginning, and how important it is to not assume that you know what folks need, and really around knowledge equity, which is so important and I think has come up quite a bit throughout the Learning Institute, but that knowledge is power and it looks different and comes in many different contexts and should be equally valued. I think we are still waiting on some questions from the audience, but again, I would just invite anyone to share any reflections they've had, or if they didn't get a chance to respond to the Fishbowl questions before and wanted to add anything in, if you had any thoughts, please feel free to jump in now. Oh, never mind, we have a question coming in. So what would be your best piece of advice to youth with lived experience to keep taking up space in mental health and substance use services?
I guess I would say just talk. Talk as much as you can about it and advocate for yourself as much as you can about it. And, you know, if you throw enough rocks out there, one of them is going to land somewhere you want it to. And, you know, I was introduced to this opportunity and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or if it was the right space for me, but I figured, you know, like, this is a chance and this is a great chance, and why not, right? Like, there's no real harm I can see from doing it. And the benefit is that, you know, I get to share my story, and, you know, organizations get to hear from, you know, the person they're serving. And I only think that that can do good. So yeah, I would say just like try and get your voice out there, do all the things you can do, talk to as many people as you can if you feel comfortable about it, to sort of open up the conversation around mental health and substance use so it becomes common, so it becomes, you know, a dinner table conversation and people don't cower away from it.
Thank you so much, Najat. So we have other questions. I'll let our other speakers have a chance to respond to this one first.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Najat, for that. I also wanted to add to that, sharing that if you aren't able to find any spaces to share your experiences, you can also create your own spaces, working with other youth with similar identities or shared experiences and creating a platform yourselves. I think oftentimes we look to certain platforms to guide us, but we can also create our own platforms, knowing that grassroots organizations and movements sometimes lead to the best change and the most change. So if you aren't able to find a space or you feel like you don't fit into any of the spaces that are out there, please create your own, and you'll definitely be able to attract others who are probably feeling the same way.
Thank you so much, Hodan. And we have some other questions that really seem to tie into this theme. So maybe I'll ask those and our speakers can reflect on this question or other questions that have been asked already. But what are some of the first steps we can take to address the systemic discrimination in the mental health and substance use system? It's a big question. And if you need a little time to think about that, we have some other questions as well. So how do we build spaces for BIPOC people? And similarly, what can organizations do to create safe spaces for these conversations?
As for the first question, I would say anything that you can do to make yourself kind of comfortable opening up about the issues is a great way to start. So for me, that took to having conversations with my friends first, and then eventually reaching out to social media and just kind of, you know, posting stories. I know that it doesn't sound like a lot, but the replies you get from people are so surprising, and it's so motivating to hear what other people are thinking, and they give you their knowledge, and in turn you can give knowledge to other people as well. And then if you can, I know it's kind of hard, I talked about this already, but even talking with your family, because like I said earlier, there are generational gaps that can happen, and it's really important that, because things are so hard, first generation wise, maybe you can help benefit the next generation, and even talking to your younger siblings, younger cousins about things that, or even just asking them if you're not comfortable doing it, like, what do you think about this? Just so that it can get their mind going and help them understand and look into it more even when they're older.
Thank you, Sherry. I'll open it up to any of our other speakers who want to answer these questions.
For the second question, so I think that what we could start to do is maybe implement some policies regarding institutional ways of addressing I would say like different cultures and religions. So for example, instead of focusing on the ethnocentric holidays such as like Christmas, Easter, we could also include some other ones such as maybe like Diwali, Ramadan, for example, so that we are reaching more cultures and we are fostering a more inclusive environment and atmosphere in which all people of different cultures feel comfortable and safe going to school and working in these organizations. So this, I think, will take some time, given that it's quite a complex thing. But I think that we could start maybe on a more of a smaller scale, macro level in institutions and such as schools and workplaces to maybe have some clauses or have some practices in which we recognize other people. And this could look like maybe a multicultural day, that maybe people bring a favorite dish, or that we have more awareness of the difficulties. So for example, maybe if you have been fasting all day and you're asked to maybe complete a task, maybe we could provide accommodations for that. So just kind of so we could be a little bit more mindful of people's experiences and their struggles or things that they might be dealing with. That way we can kind of be more inclusive again, and hopefully this will empower everybody to even love further what they're doing. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Rudy. There's some excellent points there, and I'll invite our other speakers to answer this question if they'd like, or we have another question from the audience that we can move on to.
I think I would just like to add that there are successful organizations run and led by Black and racialized people out there. And I mean, we don't have to figure out how to do everything from scratch here, right? Like they did a lot of the work and they are willing to share their research and what has worked and what has not worked, and maybe reworking that slightly in a way that works for your organization as well, right? Like the trial and error period has already kind of been done by a lot of these great organizations, and the best way to learn is to learn from each other. So I would just say, like, reach out to these organizations that are successful and are out there and are, fighting this inequality already.
Such a good point. Thank you, Najat. So we have just a few minutes left here, so I'll go to the final questions. So are schools doing enough to support youth in their mental health journeys, and are there cheerleaders or big supporters there?
I'm just going to chime in and say no. I am a secondary student and I don't really feel like my school has helped me or provided spaces. For example, I've always lived off of campus. I lived at home and commuted, and a lot of the mental health resources were promoted through posters in residence, a place that I physically had no access to. So that was a barrier. And then, going in higher years, it's more focused on academia and less focused on well-being. And there's a misunderstanding because those go hand in hand. I would definitely just say that there's really not enough being done. And I wish there was. And I am very proud of my colleagues and peers who have made their own spaces, but I really wish that, universities and colleges would, put some back into it themselves.
Thank you, Najat. Such good points there. And I'll invite any of our other speakers to answer this as well.
Yeah, just to add to Najat's point, I also feel the same way. I was in a role where I was trying to provide support to students as a peer health educator, and it was there I really realized the lack of supports that were provided for university students, whether that be the shortage of service providers on campus, whether that be the lack of diverse service providers that are able to recognize and understand the experiences of the wide, diverse range of students on campus, whether it be, just not being able to access a service due to other barriers. And I think this is also relevant if you're looking at kind of the high school, secondary level. I know that due to COVID-19, there has been an increase in mental health, conversations around mental health for high school students. And I think there also needs to be more support for them to essentially provide their support as they transition to post-secondary.
Thank you so much, Hodan. And Sherry, did you want to add?
Yeah. I had a very similar experience with Hodan and Najat in that sense. Also, like, I didn't really know where to get that support. So I think overall the school system can do a better job. But I do want to highlight kind of like the teachers and the professors that really helped me out, and even just family members I know and friends I know. They were very, very, I don't want to say forgiving, but like accommodating is the word. Yes, big brain. Accommodating to a lot of my needs. I went through a lot of mental health issues during the school year, especially around second year. And I felt like very open with a lot of my professors and facilitators in nursing school. I was able to take breaks. They were able to give me extensions on many different things. And sometimes I didn't even have to ask for it. I just say that I'm having trouble, like, can you help me with this? And then they would offer it. So I thought that was interesting to see, because everyone does talk about how there are issues with the school system, especially like, we all hear of like U of Tears kind of stereotypes and stuff like that. But even people from U of T, I know that the mental health aspect of it all is really hard for them, and professors have been so helpful in that sense. And yeah, I think that's really important, since they're the ones that are really in direct contact with a lot of their students.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And thank you so very much to all of our speakers for being here today. A lot of work has gone into this, and I'm just so grateful to have been able to share this conversation and space with you. And I know we had some questions from the audience about how to connect with you all. So I know we don't have too much time left, but my wonderful colleague Jimmy will be posting my email in the chat, and I will help you get connected to the wonderful folks we have here on the panel. So thank you again, and we'll be taking a short 5-minute break before we come back for our final closing ceremony. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. Whether in chat boxes or breakout rooms, interactive tools or social media, your engagement and collaboration has been incredible. In fact, at one point we were trending in Canada on Twitter. We hope everyone enjoyed the Learning Institute. We'll begin with an announcement from our hackathon moderator. Handing it over to you, Forrest.
Hello, everybody. Over the last few days, I've had the privilege of working with some amazing individuals at the first Learning Institute Hackathon. We saw many participants come from all around Canada to work together. They shared their ideas, personal experiences, and creativity to design interventions that could be implemented in different places. It was really amazing to see the outcome of each team. The hackathon was designed to allow the projects to be realized in many different forms. Teams took already developed characters and designed interventions to help them where they were. Teams went through a brainstorming session before doing research further into their topic, and finally built their presentation in the form of stories, slides, and posters. So now to announce the winners of the hackathon. 4 teams showed off their projects this morning, and an audience of judges and other Learning Institute participants loved each one. But we did have criteria and we did have to find a winner. However, before I announce them, I do want to acknowledge the work of all the teams. First, Team Cubone designed Canony, a mentorship program to support immigrant and newcomer youth population to feel and be well supported in their journey arriving to Canada, navigating multiple systems while developing and maintaining powerful relationships. Team Tentacle developed Coffee House, a plan for a peer support network for rural youth in the process of coming out. Private groups would be created on Discord for members to share resources and knowledge on a weekly basis through voice and video chat. Next, Team StarU developed a story through which a local business could host an event for remote youth to gather, connect, engage, and champion topics of adversity through mobilities such as slam poetry, slam speakership, competency training, animal therapy, which was actually alpaca petting, and speed friending. Finally, Team Chansley designed a plan for a Discord server that would help improve connections to the home communities and cultures of remote youth. It focused on reducing stigma against mental health, seeking mental health among ethnic groups that might be hesitant to engage in traditional mental health services. And so, without further ado, can I get a drum roll, everybody at home? I'd like to congratulate Team Tentacle for winning the first Frayme Hackathon. Everybody, a round of applause. Now that the hackathon is over, I hope that everybody who participated in any capacity can take what they've learned back to their own communities. Hackathons aren't just for what is created during them, but also what can come after. The iterative process we explored during our sessions together was a way to share and build on one another's ideas. The sense of community that was built during the hackathon was really amazing. We on the Frayme team also learned a lot about what worked for a hackathon outside of the tech field. If anyone would like to access the hacker handbook that was created for the hackathon, it is free to use and share as you would like. So thank you everyone who participated for being willing to approach a new challenge, and I hope that we can see more events like this in the future. I'll pass it back to you, Kulpreet.
Thank you so much, Forrest. How exciting. We'd like to welcome back Frayme's Executive Director, Shauna Mccackern, for a closing message now.
Thank you, Kulpreet, and thank you, Forrest. It is exciting. I want to start with thanks and gratitude. I have so much humility, and I'm feeling so humble right now from everything that we've kind of gone through together over the last 3 days. So I want to start by thanking youth and families, service providers, researchers and scientists, and everybody who joined us. I want to thank my Frayme team, because a lot of work goes into bringing this event to you. And so I do want to give a shout out to the Frayme team and all of those that were sort of our honorary Frayme team through bringing you this Learning Institute. It's really an impossible job. It's an impossible feat for me to be able to sum up all of the bravery, the honesty, the investment, the passion, the discussion, the reflection that I've seen over the last 3 days. As I said, it brings me a huge sense of humility and gratitude. And so instead of kind of ending with my words, I want to end with our collective words. When I provided my opening remarks, I asked the question, what is defying convention? What does it mean? And I said it's really a discussion that we all have to have. And I believe that. And I think it's a discussion we have been having. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like ask everybody just in the chat to write one word, which is also an impossible feat, but one word that you're going to take with you, something that resonates with you, something that has meant to you, something that you're hopeful for. I asked the same of the Frayme team. I heard things like energizing, hopefulness, inspiration, momentum, collaboration. I heard about expertise. I heard about hackathons and Discord and learning new ways of understanding how we can connect. So I'm going to ask everybody to start typing in your word of reflection, and my lovely and wonderful colleague Jimmy is going to type them to me so that I can share them back. So I'm going to give everyone just a moment to start typing in, but I'd really love our collective words to be my final reflection. So we're hearing collaboration, gratitude, inspiring, experience, connection, partnership, future, collaboration, fearless, engagement, innovate, rejuvenating, more innovation, growth, humility, appreciation, aspiration, fun, change, gratitude, clarity, direction, connected, healing, intentionability, empowerment, co-creation, openness, strength, recovery, acknowledgement. Jimmy is still typing. Grounding, courage, powerful, power, support, diversity, healing, connectivity, transparency, engaging, collaboration, virtual, curiosity, uncomfortable at times, but in a good way. It's more than one word, but we'll allow for it because it's an important one. Safe, personal, holistic, relentless, a way forward. I see a pause in what Jimmy is writing, and I am sure others are joining in as well. So I'll try to capture a few more, but just to say that what we're seeing there, I think, is a lot of hopefulness, a lot of collaboration, a lot of braveness. And I think that's what I'm hopeful that we can move forward with. This was the beginning of a conversation. This is not the end of a conversation. People are talking about resiliency, togetherness, empathy, and equity. And so all of our thoughts, all of our collective reflections, all of our final collective closing remarks are what I'd like to end this with. And again, the feeling of gratitude, the feeling of humility. And I want to thank everybody. I'm going to pass it back to Sierra at this point.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shauna, for facilitating that collective reflection to really bring our Learning Institute together. So to close, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming, participating, and connecting. We'll be in touch with you all shortly for the following items. We'll be recapping our event. We're going to share the knowledge resources that came out of some of the sessions. We're going to have an opportunity to sign up for Frayme's newsletter on our website. Remind you on how to view the recordings of all the wonderful presentations for up to 30 days after our Learning Institute is completed. And provide you a feedback form to evaluate the entire event and let us know what you thought about it, so we can continue to grow, improve, and provide those services and the things that you want to learn about for you when you need it. I'm going to pass it now back to Gulpreet.
Thank you, Sierra. This Learning Institute is made possible by Frayme's generous funders and all the wonderful stakeholders who make this work possible. We'd like to thank our corporate sponsor, RBC Future Launch. Thank you to the Ontario Centre of Excellence for Child and Youth Mental Health. Thank you to the over 100 speakers and contributors who are dedicating their time to share their experiences. We also had many wonderful exhibitors at this event, and we thank them for sharing their services. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes, including our technical team with Bond, who helped put this amazing event together. Finally, thank you all for taking the time to attend the Frayme Learning Institute. Spaces like this offer an incredible opportunity for learning and unlearning, deconstruction and rebuilding, work around decolonization and anti-oppression, vulnerability and healing. But as Shauna said, this is just the beginning. We must do better. As we process this experience and foster new connections, please remember to be kind with yourself so that you can be rested and renewed as we roll up our sleeves to combat the work ahead. Until next time, stay safe and take care.